history, which has included our support of enlargement, which has seen our economy grow and sustained growth as well, which has seen our country become more liberal, which has seen us actually more active on the international field. And I think that is a great problem that we will have to deal with, and historians will ask the question, why did we do it in years to come? But we have to make sure that we understand the gravity of the situation and the seriousness of our decision. Now, I campaigned very hard to stay in the European Union. In my own constituency, I got 55% to say yes, and across the country I also actively campaigned. But I did say that this was the decision and the decision that mattered. And so I feel duty-bound, therefore, to recognise that I have to support Article 50 this week. But I do so with a very, very heavy heart. And I just want to say something about trade. There seems to be the idea that because we're in the European Union, we can't trade elsewhere. Wrong. Germany does, France does, Italy does, Poland does, Spain does, and they all export to the rest of the world precisely because they're in the European Union and precisely because we have free trade agreements with the rest of the world. And all of that will have to be remade, repeated by us. And let's make that point clear. Yeah.
If, as he supposes, it's the European Union has been so successful in setting trade deals, how is it that Switzerland is actually able to set many, many more trade deals than the European Union has managed over the years?
I think it's worth bearing in mind that the European Union right now accounts for almost a quarter of the world's gross domestic product and a huge amount of trade with it. And I think that is a signal of just why it is important for us to bear in mind what the European Union has done for us. Now, what I want to go on to is the 48%. Because it's absolutely crucial that the 48% are properly represented in this process. When we have a general election and elect a government, we don't expect that government just to govern for one bit of the country. We expect that government to govern for the whole part of the country, every aspect of national life. That's what I do in my own constituency. I do not say, did you vote for me before I start dealing with them? I say, you are one of my constituents, whoever you voted for. And that's how we've got to deal with this business about Brexit. Recognise the 48% has a say and should be included, because that's how we are going to bring this together. We need to open it up and make sure that we reach out to them, and for us, obviously, on the 48% side, reach out to the others. When we are looking at the Great Repeal Bill, and remember what happened to the Conservative Party when we looked at the Great Reform Act, we will discover one or two things about our national life which is quite important. That we are not actually being told by the European Union all of the time to do things we don't want to do. And I am looking forward to the opportunity of exposing those facts when we go along that process of the debate. Because I think Brexiteers will be disappointed to discover that quite a lot of things that we are supposedly wanting to repeal are things that we might want to retain. Yes?
Honourable gentleman for giving way, and on that point of being told what to do, was he astonished by the speech of the member for East Antrim, who's not here at the moment, that the feeling in Northern Ireland was the EU was telling them what to do, and that was a terrible thing. But now that Northern Ireland is being told to leave the EU by the UK, that seems to be an okay thing. And the idea of who's telling who to do what seems to be a shape-shifting ideal.
I usually find when I'm telling somebody to do something that they don't want to do, that I get the blame, and when I suggest something we do want to do, it was their idea in the first place. And I think that's how we should remember this. And I think when we look back on our history, we'll see that that is absolutely right about the European Union. Now, what I want to talk about are events. Harold Macmillan was a great one for events. We've got 2 years of very important events to face. And some of those events are going to be unpleasant. And some of them are going to be quite surprising. And I can't predict what they are going to be. But what I do think is that the government really does have to react carefully to those events, because they will include changes in economic news. They will include situations in international policy which actually require a response above and beyond what we are focusing on in terms of Brexit. So remember events. Remember they will give opportunities for a more sensible view about the way in which we direct our negotiations and our sense of purpose towards Brexit. That's why this Parliament must have a significant say in the way in which we operate, because those events will affect this country, they will affect our judgment, they will affect the negotiations, and they will affect the overall outcome. And Parliament is the place for those to be discussed and properly debated, not press releases and everything else that we might imagine. Parliament is the national place for those decisions. Now, I want to mention something else which I think is really critical. We cannot leave Europe in terms of geography. We are only a few miles away from the European Union, the continent. So we are going to always have to have very good relationships with the continent, with the 27 nation states. And I would urge the government and all of us during the next 2 years to make sure that those relationships are actually built on, strengthened, because we do not wish, Madam Deputy Speaker, to find ourselves in a situation where we do not have that friendship, we do not have those alliances. Why? Because Europe itself will change, and we want to be part of that change, driving it forward to even greater and better things. But that will offer us the opportunity, if we play our cards right, to think, for example, and I'm just speculating, associate membership, for instance. We must not turn our backs on the opportunities that might present themselves in the future. So that is why I am very keen that Parliament does have a strong role in this, that we do during the next 2 years think of those events, think of those opportunities, and retain and strengthen those relationships. Now, of course, it's essential, I believe, for Parliament to have some final say on these matters when we get to the end game, if we actually do get that end game. And that's why I think it's important. It's not just necessary to talk about voting on deal or no deal, but I think we need to have a view about where we go if such a deal does not emerge, which is satisfactory, or such a deal doesn't even emerge at all. We must have a contribution to make. Because it is not correct to say that the European Union is hell-bent on making life a misery for us, because everybody knows that we are interdependent, we know that, they know that, and it's important for us to accept that as a Parliament and as a country. A constituent of mine had a very good phrase, which I am going to borrow. He said, you shouldn't jump out of an aeroplane without checking that the parachute is working. And that is what we have to consider when we head towards the final moments in 2 years. So I summarise by saying this. Consider how we will incorporate this whole decision around not just the 52, but the 48. Think about the opportunities through the events that may arise, or the threats that may arise from those events. Maintain good relationships, and above all, recognise this Parliament is sovereign. It always actually has been, and that's what we have to recognise and salute.